in Goshen, right above Goshen Pass. How they got Bath when they're in Rockridge County, I don't know, but he did own those as well. You had Harry Fernstone, who resurrected the Longdale operation to become the Longdale Company, and his Fernstone Manor House still resides there to this day. And then you had the Jordan family, and they were the premier family in operating the iron industry in Virginia. They operated 10 facilities in the Highlands, 8 of which were in Alleghany County. And the two main players, Edwin and Ira, their father John was the founder of the business. John Jordan's home, Stono, was part of the VMI campus now, and he was big into canal construction. A number of the older buildings in Lexington his firm built. So he was a major player and mover in industrialization of the area. And when he passed away, his sons, of which there were a number, acquired the business. But the two that were most prevalent here, Ira and Edwin, are both buried in Alleghany County. Edwin at Sharon Baptist Church in Glen Haven, the nice big mansion out there that's used for special events, was his home. And then Ira is buried in Cedar Hill here in Covington. So they were the main players in getting us up and going. And then after the Civil War, they sold off their holdings to others like William Bernstone, and others began to operate the iron after that. On a downside of all of that, though, the Jordans and William Weaver relied on enslaved peoples to operate their furnaces. And it was an interesting thing, and I highly recommend you read sometime if you ever get a chance. I don't know if the local library has it, because I bought mine. It's called Bond of Iron. I actually got to speak to the author once, Charles Dew. William Weaver kept meticulous records of his iron operation, including all of his slaves. And this gives an excellent rendition of what the daily life was for an enslaved person in that operation. And they went from everything from growing the food, but the interesting part was the skilled labor that made the iron were all slaves. They weren't, I always assumed they'd be, people he would hire, but they were all enslaved for the most part. And both he and the Jordans used a system called overwork to incent the slaves to work beyond the minimum. They would actually pay them a wage if they performed above a certain level of production. And to the best amount of documentation that I can find, the first black man who had a bank account in Lexington was one of William Weaver's slaves who was able to generate that from the money he earned. Now, make no mistake, they were still slaves. They didn't control their life. The quality of their life might have been better than some of their counterparts. But without the slaves, they would have never been able to produce the iron. So, all of a sudden we have this wonderful growth after the antebellum and the Civil War period. And I think Paul mentioned this a little bit ago. One of the driving factors of that growth was the coming of the railroad. Because, as Paul mentioned, getting the product to market was difficult. You either hauled it over North Mountain by wagon on the old Midland Trail, which was built by Colonel Jordan in 1827, or you floated it in bateaus down the cow pasture and the James till you got to the canal and you could transport it down. Neither one was great, but the railroad changed all that. It provided access to coal fields in West Virginia for coking coal. It made transporting your goods to market much easier. And that's when all the growth in the modern furnaces like Alleghany Ore and Iron Company and Lowmore and Longdale all became possible. And that's when in the 1870s, when all these furnaces were gearing up and all these mines were opening, the population of Alleghany County grew by almost 65%. That was in direct relation to the iron industry. And it's estimated that Lowmore employed up to 1,200 employees, Longdale up to 800, and then all the others, the Princes down in Glen Wilton, and there was a furnace here in Covington. I don't want to forget that over at Sunnymead, but that was a furnace owned by the Lowmore Company. So it was just, they had 3 furnaces, Lowmore 1 and 2, and Lowmore and then Covington furnace. So again, they were the largest producer of iron in Virginia. So Alleghany County has been kind of been on the forefront of technology in the iron industry. The first furnace to utilize coking coal was the old Lucy Salina, then named the Longdale No. 1. And they were so good at it, they built a second furnace, Longdale No. 2. And they were one of the first furnaces to go out. I think the Princess closed in 1910, 1911 is when Longdale closed, although they continued to lease their iron resources, their iron assets to the Lowmore Company, who continued to mine those ore reserves that they had. And I think the Victoria closed in 1920, and the Alleghany Ore and Iron Company in 1920. You can still, if you know where to look when you go through Iron Gate, over where where AmeriGas has their facility, there are about 4 little houses perfectly sized right in there. They were housing for the Alleghany Ore and Iron Company, and they're still there to this day. Now, one of the things that interests me most, which comes into W&L, because they've done such wonderful work out there, are the little mining hamlets that sprang up to support the industry. Because often the mines were located at a significant distance from the furnace, so they lived on site. And some of the hamlets that would have existed would have been California over on Bratton's Run. Dolly Ann even had a little community down in there. There's been some pictures of old houses there. Fenwick Mines over in Craig County, which Fenwick Mines was a producer for the Lowmore Company. Hematite, the little village of Hematite up there was Stack Mines up there. Jordan Mines, which was a pretty large community with very little left of it now. Lignite over in Oriskany, the tumbleweed town I was telling you about earlier. Longdale Mines, which is where W&L has done a great deal of work. And then Rich Patch Mines. And I've had the opportunity to explore a lot on Longdale Mines. A lot of it, the W&L archaeologists have actually excavated it out, but there's some structures that, they're structures because of the indentations in the ground that have never been excavated. And I'll show you some pictures of some of the many interesting things I found there. Of course, it is National Forest, so I admire them and appreciate them and lay them back to where I found them. But an interesting story that I like to tell is my wife Cindy, when she was doing her family history, found evidence that seemed to indicate that her mom as an infant and her grandparents actually lived in one of the houses there in Longdale Mines. And that's a special connection for me when I go there to think that. And if you've ever seen a picture, some of the old books, the history of Clifton Forge will show you, and they'll tell you it's the village of Longdale Mines, but it's actually not. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. In here somewhere. Be the last one. I'm sure some of you have seen this picture before that shows a little bit. It says Longdale. But that's not Longdale down where the stacks are. That's the village of Longdale Mines. It's about halfway up. And right near where the village of Longdale Mines is located was where the Australia furnace was located. And not way down next to the stacks where the original Lucy Salina was located. So I can take you to this day and look at this picture, and I can take you to the foundations of these houses that existed there. It's really neat. And to think that that was someone's home, that's where they made their life and they earned their living. And it's a fascinating thing for me to go and pick up something like that and hold it and know that that was somebody's life long ago. So unfortunately, production ceased in making iron in Alleghany County in 1924 with the cessation of production at the Lowmore. They were the last ones to go. And I mentioned it earlier, the others had closed in like 1920, 1911. It took some years thereafter to liquidate all the assets before they finally, everything was pretty much done for. But one of the interesting things is there was a company called the White Slag Company, who for a period of about 13 years was engaged in hauling all the slag that had accumulated out in Longdale. And you think, I mean, these are just huge, huge piles of slag because it was valued for road construction and cement making. And I was telling someone earlier, I have some property on the Cowpasture River, and where the original wagon road went up through there along the river. Every time when I mow, sometimes I'll find pieces of slag where it had obviously been used to pave the road at some point in time, because it was so much of it. And so if you ever out, oh gosh, what's the name? Longdale Station Road out near Triangle. You drive that all the way down to the end, you'll see some big concrete piers on your left. And that's where the White Slag Company transferred the slag from their little narrow gauge cars onto the main railroad cars to haul it to where they were selling. And they made good money off of that. So, you know, there were some major forces that did end the iron industry here. The discovery of huge deposits of rich, easy to mine iron ore in the Sabi Range in Minnesota was a big factor. The shift of industrialization to Ohio and Pennsylvania was another major factor, because they could load up huge container ships with the Minnesota ore and float them right across the Great Lakes to the furnaces. And all the mines, all the iron companies here struggled with the C&O for transportation. There was a constant struggle. And then the conversion to steel, which became so much more prevalent, and the furnaces and all here weren't as well set up to compete with the furnaces that were making steel. And to convert to making steel, California furnace was converted to make steel, but they never went into production and never proceeded after that. And so you think of the companies like Longdale, Lowmore, they all owned their own coal fields. Lowmore owned Kmore Coal Company over in New River Gorge. Longdale owned its own coal mines, and that's where they got their coking coal from. So they were all dependent on the railroad so much, both for inbound and outbound traffic. And they really struggled with that. So, you know, if you ever really want to get into it, there's some great resources. There's Leslie's Iron Manufacturers Guide. This goes up through 1859, I think, and some of the information is, a lot of these furnaces I talked about, he'll show they were dilapidated and out of blast, but they were resurrected during the Civil War to make iron. The Bond of Iron I mentioned earlier, an excellent book by Charles Dewitt, but the Buffalo Forge, the Etna Furnace, and the skilled labor that he depended on from slaves. Norman Scott's River of Iron. I actually had begun the process of writing a book till he came out with this one, and I said, well, he kind of beat me to it. He even stole my title of Alleghany Iron somewhere in there. So, no, that was Al Cressy, I'm sorry. So I ceased, but this is an excellent book. Got some great pictures again. Some of the information is not accurate, but the same could be said of mine. I'm sure there's some inaccuracies in there. The C&O Historical Magazine that was written by Al Cressy. This is another really nice article, a nice summary of the iron industry and some really nice pictures, and great resource. The Upper James River Atlas has got some old historical data about the furnaces, mainly because of the James River Canal and how it was going to service the area. But great sources. And I had the blessing, of course my wife had to tell me what it was. I found this on a hike one day, and I knew it was a pig of iron when I picked it up, so it's got to be. So I took it home and I said, that's a pig of iron, a partial pass. I wonder what that LLIE stands for. And she looked at me like I was an idiot and said, Cali, C-A-L-L-I-E, sure enough. And that had gotten non-processed, and I'm guessing if you have a pig of iron break off, that's not showing your market that it's the greatest piece of iron at that time, being it's brittle and stuff. So they would have not wanted to process that. The two types of iron ore that were mined in Iron County were limonite, or brown ore. It's also used to make pigmentations, brown pigments. That's an example of limonite. It was the prevalent one. But we also had hematite. This is a nice shale-based example of hematite. And another piece, a lot of the mines up in Dolly were hematite. But hematite's not always red. It can be red, it can be black, it can be gray. But one way you can always tell whether it's hematite or not, because it's the only one that'll do it. You can take a rasp, you can rub it right across it. And if it leaves a red streak, that's a dark red, then you know it's hematite. Limonite will leave a brown streak. So you get that one. See the nice red? So you know it's hematite. And this is a piece of slag came from Lowmore. The furnaces were so much more efficient then than the antebellum ones. So you don't. This is pretty much just melted limestone with impurities attached to it. That's what it is, and it's really light. But you go to some of the old antebellum ones. Y'all are welcome to come up later if you'd like. And you get this beautiful colored furnace obsidian, as I call it. And that's so much of the iron ore was sedimentary and it's sandstone, and this is the silicon that's melted in the process. What gives it its color are other minerals, and my research has led me to believe that cobalt would color it blue, like that. Black would be manganese, which we have a lot of that around here, and even in this area we had manganese mines. I think it was used as an alloy for steel hardening, if I remember correctly. And then green, I've never been able to determine exactly what that is, but my guess would be perhaps some trace elements of copper would have given it the green color. But my wife's actually got a nice piece of jewelry she bought somewhere. It's made out of the of obsidian, and then you know on the slag piles you can find old pieces of iron that were adhered to the slag when it got pulled out of the furnace. And I didn't go into that a lot about the different how it's made, because there's some excellent exhibits downstairs that would explain that to you. So I'm going to show you just some pictures of what things look like today, and then I'll conclude my presentation. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. So.